In the middle of the barbecue, in front of 18 people and 2 phones recording, my son looked at the old flannel shirt I was wearing, the one I had used for 30 years on construction jobs, and said loud enough for the whole yard to hear, "Dad, wearing that makes you look like a homeless person. You're embarrassing us." The whole group burst into laughter. Kayla covered her mouth, pretending to whisper but making sure it was loud enough. "Oh my God, just looking at him kills the vibe." Before I could react, Adam stepped closer, his eyes scanning from the torn collar to my worn-out shoes, as if I were a stain on his backyard. Then in front of everyone, he spat a full mouthful of saliva right onto my face. The laughter stopped for half a second, then exploded again, even worse, and I just stood there, wiping my face with the very same flannel they were laughing at, knowing that in that moment, he didn't just humiliate me, he cut off the last thing holding the two of us together. If you believe the truth can be hidden but never erased, I'm grateful you're here. Thank you for giving your time to stories that choose what's right over what's easy. Leave a single if you believe justice can rise from silence. And don't forget to hit subscribe to walk with me on this path, where every story is a bridge between pain, trust, and truth. That night, Adam's backyard glowed under a line of warm yellow string lights, like chains tying me to a party I shouldn't have been at. The smell of grilled meat, beer, and fresh-cut grass blended, loud and festive, as if all of Maple Hill Drive was celebrating something I alone wasn't invited into. I stood in a corner, still holding the plate of food I'd paid for, wearing the old flannel I'd had since Adam wasn't even tall enough to reach my waist. He turned, saw me, and didn't bother hiding the annoyance in his eyes. "You make this place look cheap," he said, loud enough for 18 people to hear clearly. Laughter burst out all at once, spreading fast like fire meeting wind. The phone lights from Kayla's group flickered, one girl filming TikTok sweeping her camera straight toward us, like it was a comedy skit. I felt every glance sliding over me as if I were an unwanted decoration ruining the aesthetic of their party. Adam walked closer, beer breath hitting my face, and Kayla whispered, sweet and sharp, "Where did this drama come from? Seriously?" One little sentence, yet enough to make the whole group look at me like I was a misplaced background character in the very party I paid for. I opened my mouth, about to say something, but Adam cut me off, motioning with his hand the way someone dismisses an extra on a set. "Don't, Dad. Anything you say kills the vibe." His friends laughed, one guy nudging another. "Hey, look. The old man's about to explain himself." I looked at Adam, just looked, said nothing, and maybe that silence irritated him. He stepped so close I could smell the beer he hadn't swallowed yet, lowering his voice but making sure everyone heard. "You know why I hate you? Because you always embarrass me. Look at yourself. Who shows up to a party like that?" The TikTok girl turned her camera toward us, excitement in her voice. "Damn, this is getting wild." Adam glanced at me again, the look of someone testing how much humiliation I could take. Then he tilted his head, gave a strange smile, half contempt, half entertainment, and in a moment before anyone could breathe or blink, he spit straight into my face. The warm spit slid down my cheek, ran into my collar, like someone poured a whole bucket of boiling shame onto me. The backyard went dead silent for one beat. Then came the drawn-out, "Ooh!" the clatter of cutlery hitting plates, and a few bursts of laughter, the kind that only shows up when people think you're too weak to fight back. I wasn't angry. Sometimes a feeling gets so big it no longer has a name. There was only a coldness spreading from my chest down to my stomach, a kind of feeling not everyone understands. The moment you realize your own child no longer sees you as a human being. I took the old flannel cloth from my pocket, the cloth that had wiped Adam's face hundreds of times when he was little, and wiped the spit from my skin. In the middle of all those judging eyes, I suddenly felt myself shrink, not from humiliation, but from regret. regret for the little boy who, at 5 or 6 years old, used to run to hug me whenever thunder crashed. Where did he go? Who taught him that humiliating his father in front of others was a form of power? Kayla looked at me like she was watching a bad performance and said, "Oh my God, he's being dramatic now." I folded the cloth, set the plate of food on the table, and turned my back to leave. No one called after me. No one apologized. No one even wondered how an old man who had just been spit on could walk away so calmly. I walked through the string lights trembling in the wind, and every step felt like tearing away from an invisible rope I had tied around myself for decades. When the backyard door creaked softly, I knew I had just closed not only the door of that party, but the final door of the father-son bond I had kept alive with every breath. And in that moment, while the music still played behind me, while the laughter still mocked somewhere in the background, I understood one thing clearly. The house they were standing in, the place they thought was theirs, the place where they laughed at me, had never belonged to them. And tonight, my silence would be the one thing they would never forget. When I left the party that night, my steps felt heavy, as if I were carrying decades of memories. And the funny thing is, those memories weren't bad. They were so beautiful that thinking about them hurt more than any humiliation Adam had just thrown at me. I remembered clearly a summer afternoon when he was 5 years old, when sudden heavy rain fell over the field behind our old place in Boulder. Adam was wearing those tiny little sneakers, and a lightning strike not far away sent him into a panic, sobbing as if the sky was about to swallow him. I dropped all my tools on the ground, ran to him, lifted him onto my back, and ran while covering his head, with the same flannel shirt I still carry today. He hugged my neck so tight I thought it might snap, yet all I felt was warmth. That little boy once saw me as his whole world. I still remember his trembling voice asking, "Dad, can thunder eat us?" And I answered, "Thunder doesn't eat anyone. The only thing I eat is your fear." Back then, I truly believed that as long as I stayed strong and upright, my son would never be hurt. But then, when he was 12 years old, his mother died. Half the light in our little home disappeared. I remember the night after the funeral, Adam sitting by the doorway, not crying, just staring at the shoes his mother left behind. I walked over, put a hand on his shoulder, but he said something I never forgot. "Dad, don't ask if I'm okay. Just don't leave." So for many years after that, I didn't leave at all. I did everything alone: cooking, laundry, school runs, parent meetings, and even the things men rarely admit they struggle with. Days when I worked while trembling from exhaustion. Nights when I slept in my old truck at construction sites to save the gas money needed to drive home. I once used a piece of wood as a makeshift pillow. A building inspector's paycheck wasn't much. Time was even less. But I pushed through week by week, month by month, just to save enough to buy the house on Maple Hill Drive, the place I thought would give my son a steadier future than mine. I remember the day I signed the contract. My hand shook so badly, I signed wrong 3 times, and Adam stood beside me, smiling brightly, saying, "Dad, the new house is so nice." I didn't tell him that 90% of the down payment came from my own savings, that there were months I didn't dare buy new work boots, even though the soles were torn. I let him think the two of us contributed together, so he wouldn't realize how much he was leaning on me. I also hid the fact that my name was the only one on the deed, not to keep control, but to protect his pride. From the time he was 26 years old, all the way until 33, he lived with me in that house, never paying a single dollar of rent, sometimes buying a few grocery bags and calling that sharing the burden. But for me, hearing him come home each night, hearing his footsteps on the wood floor, feeling like he still needed me, those things were worth more than any money. I thought that with time, when he grew up, started a family and settled down, he would understand what I had done. But life doesn't follow the expectations of fathers. The older he got, the more Adam believed everything he had was because of his own brilliance. He said he wanted to move out, be independent, and be a real man. I was glad. I thought he was finally maturing. But the truth was different. He moved out by moving into the front section of the very same Maple Hill house I had spent my life paying for. He wasn't independent at all. He just switched rooms and called it adulthood. House bills, I paid. Heating system maintenance, I paid. The final mortgage payment on Maple Hill itself, I paid that too, because I didn't want my son to step into marriage with debt hanging over him, and I believed that would be enough for him to see my heart. But the sad paradox of parenthood is this: the more you give, the more a child thinks they deserve even more. And the more they believe they deserve, the easier it is for them to forget who sacrificed their own years to clear the path for them. Tonight, when Adam's spit hit my face in front of 18 people, I didn't just feel humiliation. I felt failure. Not failure because I was shamed at a party, but because I had lost the little boy who once clung to my neck, trembling in the storm when he was 5 years old. But whether it was failure or not, that no longer matters, because even if he forgets everything, I don't. I remember every dollar I put into the Maple Hill house. I remember every payment, every fee, every document, every signature. And most importantly, I know clearly, both legally and morally, that the house still belongs to me. What he did tonight only made me wake up to that truth a few months earlier than planned. I began to realize the first cracks didn't come from a blow, a shout, or a big argument, but from the small lines, sharp like the edge of paper, thin enough that outsiders would think it was a joke, but deep enough to cut into a father's heart. One weekend afternoon, I was rehanging some boards on the porch when Kayla, Adam's wife, looked me up and down and said in that half-sweet, half-sneering voice of hers, "Have you been wearing that flannel since 1980? I gave a small laugh, let it slide, but her eyes drifted down to my frayed sleeve, like she was inspecting a discounted item for defects. Adam stood beside her, and instead of defending or softening the moment, he lifted the shiny bomber jacket he wore, turning for everyone to see the brand new logo. "See, Dad? Wearing old stuff makes you look poor. I have to keep my image up. Just ordered another set last week." I looked at the jacket, then at the new truck he had parked in the driveway, shiny as a mirror, charcoal gray, temporary tags still taped on. I knew instantly another payment plan. He was living on things that weren't truly his, things kept breathing only by finance companies, while I just stood there watching the two of them show off items that would be hauled away the moment a single payment was missed. Kayla walked past me, sniffed lightly, and covered her mouth with a giggle. "New house, but that old wood smell is strong. You don't really fit the new house vibe." I didn't answer. I just fixed the tool rack, quite like someone who'd grown used to taking hits. I thought it was just a throwaway comment. But then, day by day, those lines came more often. Small, neat, but intentional. Another afternoon, Adam leaned against the kitchen sink with a beer, glanced at me, and said in a half-joking, half-mocking tone, "Dad, I don't get why you picked building inspection. That job is all about checking cracks, checking concrete, checking roofs. Then people tear everything down and rebuild anyway. Sounds boring as hell. No future in that." I set down the wooden clamp and looked at him for a long moment. The house he was standing in, the kitchen he was leaning against, the dining table he was about to use to host his friends, all built by my hands, but he didn't see it, or he chose not to. I only said quietly, "Keep your life as clean as this house. Don't let anything dirty cling to you." Adam gave a thin laugh, tilted his head back, and finished the beer like he was swallowing every bit of respect I'd put into that line. He set the can down, the metal hitting the table with a sharp crack. Then he said one sentence, tossed at me like a stone dropped into a well. "Did you forget? I'm the one paying the mortgage." In that moment, my whole body went cold, not because of the words, but because of the shamelessness behind them. The mortgage was in my name. The house was in my name. He was only paying the property tax I'd assigned him so he could practice responsibility. Yet he looked straight into my eyes and spoke as if he had laid every brick himself. He said it in front of his wife, in front of two of his friends lingering in the yard. He said it like he wanted me to hear, wanted them to hear, wanted to stamp one word onto my forehead. Freeloader. Kayla gave a soft laugh, glancing at me with a loaded look. No curse in it, but it was enough to tell me she enjoyed seeing me shrink, enjoyed seeing her husband stand taller above me. Those small humiliations, piece by piece, started shaping the silhouette of someone I no longer recognized as my son. Not because he was poor or rich, not because he failed or succeeded, but because he intentionally forgot the foundation of everything he stood on, forgot the hands that built the ground beneath him. And Kayla, with her voice light as a breeze but sharp as cactus thorns, stood beside him, cheering on the blindness. I looked at them and realized insolence never arrives alone. It is always fed by someone else's applause. And right then I understood. The barbecue that day wasn't the beginning. It was only the first peak. The seed had been growing for a very long time. That night, after the crowd had dispersed and the sneering laughter still lingered, like BBQ smoke that hadn't fully faded, I stood, alone in Adam's kitchen, the very kitchen I had measured tile by tile with my own hands, the ownership still under my name, yet it felt like I was standing in a stranger's home. On the counter were the wine glasses I had paid for in cash, the grilled meat I had chosen by the pound, by every dollar, yet it was someone else's hands that raised their glasses to humiliate me. The Bordeaux cork I'd opened that afternoon was still there, rolling in a slow circle as if it too wondered how a child could forget his roots so quickly. The dull yellow kitchen light shone down on a sink full of half-eaten plates, all food I paid for, and I saw my reflection in the steel oven door, blurred, warped, silent, like a man fading out of his own life story. I lifted my head, and right then my eyes landed on a photo stuck to the fridge. Adam at 5 years old, his arms around my neck, his cheek pressed against mine, his eyes bright like the word pride had never existed. I brushed my finger along the edge of the picture, and something inside me tightened, not from sadness, but from realizing the boy in that photo had died long ago. Only the man in the living room now remained, the one who thought raising a wine glass and spitting on his father was an act of power. From the living room I heard his voice carry in, slurred with alcohol, but sharp and clear as a blade. "You should be grateful we let you stay here." The sentence wasn't loud, but it was enough for everything in me, the patience, the love, the hope he might change, to fall to the kitchen floor like a shattered glass. I stood still, my hand resting on the counter, the cold granite seeping into my skin like a reminder of a brutal truth. I was no longer a father in this house. I was a guest. I was an old decoration. I was something they used to feel taller. In that moment, under the dim yellow light, with the smell of red wine, grilled meat, the dirty sink, and the innocent photo on the fridge, I heard something inside me break. Not my heartbeat, but my trust. Adam kept laughing with his friends in the living room, chairs scraping, cans opening, Kayla whispering something that made them burst into giggles, as if they'd heard the funniest thing in the world, but nothing could touch me anymore. I looked again at my reflection in the oven door, a warped, older, harder version of myself, and realized that wasn't the father who had tried to hold a family together at any cost. That was someone else. Someone who had just learned that kindness can't save someone determined to be ungrateful. Someone waking up from his own dream. That night, I said nothing. But my silence was no longer tolerated. It was a boundary, a line drawn cold as steel. From that moment on, everything changed. Not because they insulted me, but because I had stopped trying to save them. And that was the crack, the one that quietly, sharply, like a blade sharpened by years of being taken for granted, split my life in a new direction. I drove the old Ford back to the small room behind the old inspection shop where I used to work. A leftover utility room from a renovation given to me for free by the new owner years ago. It wasn't a home, just a place to sleep on nights when I worked late shifts or when Adam and Kayla wanted their own space. I got used to staying there to avoid conflict. The room was small, quiet, and most importantly, no one ever questioned who it belonged to. The hallway light was dim and yellow, old, casting my shadow long and thin like the years piling onto my back. As soon as I closed the door, I turned on the desk lamp, its weak glow just bright enough to shine on the wooden shelled safe I had built with my own hands back in 2004. I knelt, turned the key, and heard a soft click, a sound so quiet no one else would notice. But to me, it felt like a door opening into a truth I had hidden from myself for far too long. I pulled out the wooden drawer and began taking things out one by one, each paper heavier than all the years of humiliation I had endured. First was the deed to the Maple Hill house, my name on the very first line, bold, clear, with a notary signature from 2010. No Adam, no co-ownership, no dispute. Next, I opened a thicker envelope, the mortgage payoff letter from 2018, confirming I had paid off the entire loan, with my own money, with the overtime hours that broke my back, with the nights I slept in my truck to save every dollar. Then I pulled out the joint account terms. Adam was not a co-owner. He was only an authorized user, meaning he could swipe the card, spend the money, enjoy the benefits. But he had no legal rights to the funds, the right to retract, the right to close, the right to freeze. All belonged to me. That paper made my hands tremble, not from anger, but from realizing that during all the time he looked down on me, treated me like an obstacle, he never knew that with one signature from me, his entire world could come to a stop. I set those documents aside and opened the last compartment. Life insurance. I was the legal owner. I paid the premiums. I could change the beneficiary whenever I wanted. Adam was only the emergency contact, a name written down from when he was still a little boy running around the yard, not someone with any actual rights to the money. I looked at the line, emergency contact Adam L., with the date 1990, and in that moment, memories rushed back like a cold wind. I remembered the day I wrote his name, his tiny hands, his head resting on my knee as he slept, the two of us living in a cramped rented room, and I swore I would give him a real home, a safe life. 24 years later, that little boy had become the man who spat in my face in front of a crowd. I looked at the papers, looked at my name, then at his, and for the first time, I saw clearly a truth I had avoided. The law stood with me, and he had nothing but illusion. I stacked the documents neatly, carefully, like someone storing away weapons for a silent but merciless war. I understood perfectly. He couldn't sue me, couldn't claim the house, couldn't keep the account, couldn't touch anything unless I was allowed to. Everything he had bragged about, everything he had stepped on me to feel powerful, all of it had been built from my labor, under my name, and could vanish the moment I stopped protecting him. When I closed the safe, I felt no heat left inside me, only cold, cold like steel, cold like the words on those pages, short, precise, absolutely lawful. And in that moment, I knew. This war would need no shouting. It would only need a signature. The next morning, I woke earlier than usual, not because I couldn't sleep, but because I already had a very clear list in my mind of what needed to be done. I made a cup of black coffee in the small room behind the old shop, sat watching the steam rise, then closed my notebook with a copy of the Maple Hill deed tucked inside, the confirmation letter that the mortgage was fully paid in 2018, the joint account terms, and the life insurance policy. Each sheet of paper was thin enough that anyone who didn't understand would think it was just paper, but I'd spent a lifetime inspecting structures. I knew what carried weight and what was just decoration. paper was no different. Close to 9 o'clock, I drove the old Ford to attorney Cynthia Rowe's office in Longmont, a 2-story red brick building with a small sign. Nothing flashy, but solid. I had met Cynthia a few times before when getting advice about preparing a will for the future, but this time was different. I walked in, the smell of paper, ink, and coffee mixing with something else, a scent found only in places where people's lives can change direction with a single signature. The assistant recognized me, smiled, and led me into the office. Cynthia sat there, gray hair neatly tied, thin framed glasses, eyes sharp like someone who had seen far too many family dispute cases to be surprised by human cruelty, yet still decent enough to stand with the right one. "Morning, Walter," she said calmly. "You look different today." I placed the folder on her desk and pushed it toward her. "Last night, my son spit in my face in front of everyone at a party," I said slowly. "I think it's time I stopped pretending." Cynthia didn't look shocked. She simply nodded, pulled the papers toward her, and began reviewing them. She picked up the deed first, scanned the owner's name, the notarization date, then nodded. "The Maple Hill property is solely under your name. No co-owner, no liens after the 2018 payoff." She lifted the mortgage payoff letter, checked the bank stamp carefully, then set it down like hammering the final nail into a joint. She opened the joint account document and gave a faint, dry smile. "An authorized user has no ownership rights, which means he can spend the money, but he cannot keep the money if you decide to close the account." I stayed silent, listening to each word, everyone sliding into place like a deadbolt. Cynthia turned to the life insurance policy, read the sections for owner and beneficiary, then looked up at me. "All of this tells one very clear story. Legally, you hold everything. Your son cannot sue you for doing what you're about to do, as long as every step follows proper procedure." I nodded. "I don't want to break the law," I said. "I just don't want to keep protecting someone who used my own house to humiliate me." Cynthia leaned back, fingers interlaced. "So what is your plan?" I looked out the window for a moment. The Longmont sky was so blue it almost hurt to look at. "I want to sell the Maple Hill house," I said, each word steady. "And I want them out of it. By the book. Not one day missing. Not one step out of order." Cynthia didn't ask why. She simply nodded once and pulled her computer closer. "All right. Legally, we'll proceed like this." She took a blank sheet and wrote 3 lines. 30-day notice to vacate. Listing. Offer par escrow closing. 30 to 45 days. "First," she said, pointing at the top line, "you sign the 30-day notice to vacate, and I'll send it by certified mail with direct delivery confirmation. They won't be able to claim they never received it. This is the first step and is completely legal. You are the owner. You have the full right to terminate their occupancy, especially since there is no lease agreement." I pictured Adam's face when he received that paper on a morning he thought would be just like any other. No police, no shouting. Just a white envelope, a piece of paper, a countdown. Cynthia wrote, "After that, we listed the house with a broker I trust. The Maple Hill market is decent right now. If priced correctly, you'll get an offer within 1 to 3 weeks. From accepting an offer to closing will take about 30 to 45 days. Escrow, inspection, bank documents, all standard." She paused and looked directly at me. "During that entire time, you won't need to explain anything to them. Everything will arrive through mail, through email, through document couriers. They can yell, they can call, but the law does not change because of their feelings." I felt something shift inside me. Not satisfaction, but the sense of finally stepping onto solid ground after years of standing in mud. "What about the joint account?" I asked. "We'll handle that after," Cynthia replied. "Today you focus on signing everything related to the house. Tomorrow you go to the bank with these documents, request a freeze, remove the authorized user, and transfer the money into a separate account. The bank will have no reason to refuse." She pulled out another set of papers, a listing agreement with a local brokerage, and explained each clause to me: commission, contract duration, the right to reject, offers that don't fit. I read every line slowly, the same way I used to study structural blueprints for a bridge. What carries weight, what might fail. In the end, I picked up the pen and signed my name onto a decision I should have made long ago, long before that spit landed on my face. Cynthia gathered the documents and clipped them neatly inside a dark blue folder. She looked up and asked one single question. Do you want to tell them first? A conversation, a warning, one last chance. I stared at the tip of the pen in my hand, then set it down on the desk. No, I said, my voice calm enough to surprise even myself. If I speak, they'll cry, they'll perform, they'll take screenshots, they'll smear it online. I've heard enough words. This time, I want the paperwork to speak. Cynthia looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. All right. From now on, stay silent. Silent and follow each step exactly. They can call, they can curse, but they cannot undo the signature you made today. I stood up and took the folder. When I stepped out of the office, the Longmont sunlight hit me straight in the face, but I didn't squint. I thought of only one thing. Tonight, they might still laugh, still raise their glasses inside the Maple Hill house, still believe it's their world. They don't know that from the moment I finished signing that paper, that house has already begun slipping out of their hands. Silent, lawful, not loud, but as certain as the concrete I inspected my entire life. Tuesday morning, I opened the Maple Hill door at the exact time Adam left for his morning shift in Boulder. He never locked it properly because he believed the entire Maple Ridge neighborhood was his kingdom, even though he didn't own a single inch of it. I stood on the porch, hands in the pockets of my old flannel, watching his faded truck roll down the hill and disappear behind the line of pines. Only when the engine sound fully faded did I take out my phone and call Angela, the realtor Cynthia recommended. 12 minutes later, her white SUV pulled up at the gate, the realtor badge on the door catching the sunlight. Angela stepped out, holding a tripod, a mirrorless camera, a laser measurer, a whole bag of tools meant to turn a man's lifetime home into cold numbers and clean images on the MLS. She gave a small, seasoned professional smile. We'll work fast, Walter. 2 hours and we're done. By the time your son comes back, all that'll be left is the smell of the wind. I nodded and opened the door. The house lit up in the morning sun as if it had no idea what was about to happen to it. The walls I had painted, sanded, patched. The wooden beams whose nails I had checked one by one. The handprints I'd left in the cement, now preparing to leave my life forever. Angela got to work, photographing each room. The living room, the kitchen, the tool utility area, the back porch. Each camera clicked sharp as a period at the end of a sentence. She knelt to frame the sofa, stood to catch the window light, then used the laser tool to measure each space. She walked through with the 3D camera, scanning every inch. I leaned against a cabinet, watching, feeling like I was witnessing a doctor dissect a familiar body. Objective, precise, emotionless. When we stepped into the backyard, Mrs. Lynn from next door stood under her maple tree, watering can in hand, staring at us. She came closer, voice low. Walter, you're selling the house? I didn't answer right away. I just looked at her, then at the house. She sighed as if she already knew. Be too good for too long, and people climb onto your head and step on your neck. I saw what happened at the BBQ. I thought you'd let it go like always. I gave a faint smile, not happy, not sad, and said only, Some things take time to crack stone. Mrs. Lynn nodded, her eyes understanding more than my words said. Angela turned to me. Walter, should I call the property boundary survey team? I nodded. 15 minutes later, 2 men in reflective vests arrived, stretching measuring lines, planting stakes, working with GPS. The beeping of their equipment echoed across the quiet neighborhood, like metal tapping on the door of someone about to lose everything. And right as they were measuring the east fence line, Adam's truck suddenly turned into the hill. He was home early. I tilted my head slightly, but Angela stayed calm, jotting notes, as if this were entirely routine. Adam braked hard at the gate, stepped out, squinting at Angela's SUV, then at the surveyors measuring the land he believed was his. He frowned. "What's going on here?" I stayed still, hands in my flannel pockets, the cold morning breeze brushing my neck. "Just some technical checks," I replied calmly. Angela smiled politely. "We're collecting property data." Adam looked at her, then at me, then at the measuring line, eyes full of suspicion, but not enough knowledge to piece anything together. He asked, irritated, "Why didn't you tell me?" I looked at him for a long moment. Then I said, "There are a lot of things that don't need to be said beforehand." Adam froze a few seconds, then stomped into the house, unaware that just a few feet from him, the realtor was finalizing the description of a house going on the MLS tonight, with my name as the sole owner and an expected price of $465,000. When he slammed the door, Angela turned to me and whispered, "Walter, are you all right?" I answered in a voice so soft the wind nearly carried it away. "I've been silent long enough." Angela studied me, then nodded. "Then let's continue." And as the late morning sun hit the Maple Hill walls, I knew I had set the gears of revenge into motion. Once the listing goes live, nothing can reverse it, not even a blood relative. When the survey team left the driveway and Angela's SUV disappeared down the Maple Hill slope, I stood alone on the porch. The late morning breeze slipped through my flannel, carrying the strange feeling of a door closing, one no one inside the house even knew existed. Adam walked past me without understanding that the last thread holding the house in his hands had been cut that very morning. And the funniest thing was, he still believed everything was under his control. Later that afternoon, a message from Kayla came. "My birthday party tonight. Be here on time." Not an invitation, an order, the way someone speaks when they think the house is their personal stage. I looked at the phone screen for a moment, then set it face down. They want me there. Good. Tonight, in front of all their friends, I'll let the truth walk into the room first. So I put on my old flannel, stood up, and walked toward the birthday party that would become the first earthquake they would never forget. Kayla's birthday party was held in the Maple Hill living room. Warm yellow lights, pink balloons, a dessert table full of cake and cheap wine she called the signature of classy parties. 22 people crowded into the house. Adam's co-workers, Kayla's friends, a few curious neighbors. They laughed loudly, raised their glasses, talked about bonuses and crypto investments, while I sat in the corner wearing the same old flannel Kayla despised, the uniform of a father never respected, in the very place he built with his own sweat. When I walked in, Kayla looked me up and down, then smirked to her friends. "There he is, perfectly in theme, old and outdated." They chuckled. I didn't react. I'd heard lines like that for years, enough to know which smiles were genuine and which were meant to push someone lower. Adam stepped out of the kitchen holding a beer, eyes red with the confidence alcohol and an audience always gave him. He looked at me the way someone looked at an uninvited item. "If you can't even afford a gift, you shouldn't have come," he said, half joking, half serious, loud enough for everyone to hear. Kayla giggled, her hand on his shoulder, acting like no guest in that party mattered more than their image. I sat quietly, letting the words land in my chest like a stone. They thought I would stay silent like always. They thought I'd swallow it and return to the little utility room behind the shop, living on the edges of my own life. But today was different. Today was the day I let the truth step into the center of the room, in front of the same crowd that had laughed at my patience. After their toast, I stood up. No one noticed at first. I calmly opened my gray canvas bag and pulled out a dark blue folder, the exact one Cynthia had used to organize all my legal documents. The overhead light hit the metal clip, sending a cold glint across the room, enough to make the table turn their heads. A few people glanced over. Adam frowned. "What are you doing?" I didn't answer. Instead, I took out the first document, the notice to vacate, the original with notarized signature and certified mail proof. The words 30 days bolded across the top made the room drop several degrees. I heard a spoon clatter lightly against someone's glass. I placed the second document on the table, an official offer from a buyer, with escrow confirmation scheduled for next week. In 2 seconds, the entire party flipped. The Spotify music suddenly sounded harsh. Every laugh died instantly, as if someone crushed the air out of the room. 22 people stood frozen, eyes fixed on the papers. Papers their arrogance had no vocabulary to interpret. Kayla went pale, lips trembling, no trace of her earlier smugness. Adam stepped forward, voice raised but stripped of confidence. What is this? What are you doing? This is my house." I looked him in the eyes, truly looked, so he could see my silence was no longer fear. It was a verdict. I lifted the notice and said clearly, steadily, "The Maple Hill house is not yours. It has never been yours." A hollow silence swallowed the entire room. No breath, no whisper. The glasses froze mid-air. The whole house felt suspended. Even the lights seemed to stop. Kayla let out a trembling sound, half-cry. Adam's face flushed, but not from anger. From the realization he was standing on ground that didn't belong to him. One of his co-workers muttered, "Wait, so you're the actual owner?" I turned the folder around, showing the signatures, the ownership line, everything as bright and undeniable as the noonday sun. Everyone could read it. Adam stepped back. His shoulders collapsed. For the first time in his life, he had no words. For the first time, his friends didn't laugh with him. No one stepped forward. That was the moment he understood. My silence had never been weakness. It had been preparation. And tonight was the night that silence finally spoke. The morning after the party, before the sun even rose over the Maple Ridge Hill, I heard Adam pounding on Kayla's door, his shouting, her sobbing, footsteps scrambling across the wooden floor. I didn't need to see it to know. He'd been awake all night because of the 2 documents I laid on the table. At 8:43, his faded truck roared to life and shot out of the driveway so fast the gravel scattered. From a distance, I watched him speed down the hill, straight toward Longmont Community Bank. He didn't understand that this tragedy hadn't begun last night. It had only just revealed itself. I arrived 9 minutes after him, standing silently in the lobby like a shadow. He didn't know I was there. I had no reason to tell him. Adam rushed to the teller counter, shouting, "I need to check the joint account, right now." The young banker, brown hair, name tag reading Emily, looked at him with polite caution. "Sir, may I see your ID?" Adam slammed his wallet on the counter, the card flying out. Emily typed a few keys into the system and immediately saw everything. Account owner, authorized user, transaction history. She inhaled softly, a tiny motion, but I saw it. "Sir," she said professionally, "the system shows clearly. You are not a co-owner. You are only an authorized user." Adam frowned, then let out a scoff. "So what? I've been using that account all year. I have rights." Emily shook her head gently, hand resting on the counter like a subtle boundary. "Authorized users may use the card. They do not have ownership. They cannot view balances if the account owner restricts access. They cannot prevent the owner from transferring funds, and they have no legal rights to the account." I stood a few meters away, hands in my flannel pockets, watching silently. Adam's voice escalated. "No way, my dad! He has no right to do this. I've always used that account. I get monthly transfers from it." Emily typed again, then looked directly at him. "Yes, and as of this morning, the account owner has stopped all auto transfers to your secondary card. It is fully legal. The system timestamp shows 7:12 a.m. Adam's face drained. He spun around, scanning the bank as if the building itself were betraying him. Then he slammed his hand on the counter. "I want to speak to the manager!" His voice was loud enough for two waiting customers to turn their heads. A security guard approached, not touching him, but standing close enough to send a clear message. Any escalation would be noted. The bank manager, Mrs. Wilson, whom I'd met many times, stepped out. Calm, white hair tied back, eyes sharp, the way people who handle American customer meltdowns tend to be. "How can we help you today, Adam?" she asked, polite but firm. Adam lifted his hand, voice cracking between rage and humiliation. "I want my account access restored. Right now." Mrs. Wilson opened the file on her screen, examined it, then looked back at him. "No, Adam. Your secondary access has been revoked by the account owner. Only the owner can request changes. But I'm his son. And banking law does not recognize family relationships. Only legal ownership." Adam clenched his jaw, voice breaking. Why would he do this? The manager studied him for a moment, then said slowly, "We do not ask for reasons when an account owner performs legal actions." He's destroying my life," her reply was as even as steel. "Everything Mr. Walter has done is within legal boundaries." A soft click sounded, the guard resting his hand on his radio, a quiet precaution. Adam froze. The two nearby customers stared. One man whispered, "Heard the Maple Hill house is about to be sold." An older woman nodded. "Treat your father like dirt and expect him to endure forever? Not a chance." Adam heard every word. His face flushed, red, then turned pale. He spun around too fast, stumbling, nearly tripping over the carpet. When he pushed the door open, the daylight hit him full in the eyes, making him squint, but it couldn't hide the humiliation weighing on his shoulders. He didn't know I was only a few steps away. Didn't know I saw every movement, every shaky breath, every drop of panic leaking through the cracks of his arrogance. I stepped aside so he wouldn't see me. I didn't need him to know I witnessed this. His collapse didn't need an audience. It only needed the truth. On the 41st day after I signed the listing agreement, an email arrived from the escrow company. Closing completed. Funds dispersed. Possession transfers today. Just one line, as short as metal touching metal. But it was the final period on a lifetime of arrogance. I stood at the bottom of Maple Hill Slope, in the shadow of a red maple tree, watching the sheriff's vehicle crawl up the road, followed by Angela's car and a mover's truck. No one rushed, yet everything in that formation breathed inevitability, a process that could not be reversed, delayed or swayed by any amount of screaming. The Maple Hill house had its kitchen lights on. Adam had just woken up, stepping onto the porch with messy hair, a wrinkled t-shirt collar, still holding the coffee cup he proudly called the morning routine of a successful man. He was still rubbing his eyes when the sheriff stepped onto the porch and handed him a paper stamped with a blue seal. "Today is the final possession transfer, sir." Adam blinked, confused. "What? Transfer what? I still have time." The sheriff shook his head. "No, you do not. Closing is finished. The house has been transferred to the new owner. Today is the lawful handover." Neighbors heard the sheriff's car and came outside. A young couple from house number 12 brought their phone out to record. Mrs. Lynn stood by the fence with her arms crossed. A group of teens walking by stopped. In under a minute, Maple Hill had become a stage, but not the stage Adam wanted. Kayla burst out the door, mascara smeared into 2 black streaks, still wearing her sleep shorts. She saw the sheriff, the movers, Angela with her clipboard. She screamed, "What is this? Why today? We still have 3 weeks." Angela replied lightly, like a breeze. "No, you had exactly 30 days of notice. Today is enforcement day. The new owner needs possession by this afternoon." Adam threw his coffee cup onto the ground, liquid splashing all over the shoes he had strutted around in for 2 years. "No! Walter can't do this! I'm suing! I'm calling a lawyer!" The sheriff straightened. voice level and cold. You are free to sue, but today's transfer proceeds regardless. Interference will be documented. A live stream tone chirped nearby. Bip, bip, live on. A young man whispered, "Wait, isn't that the guy who spat on his dad at the BBQ?" The whole crowd turned. Someone else said clearly, loudly enough to cut through the morning air, "Is he the one who spat on his father?" Adam heard it. He froze mid-yard, his face turning as white as an escrow sheet. This was no longer a family matter, no longer something that stayed within the house. And this time, the humiliation wasn't from me. It came from the public, from the community he once bragged to, pretended for, and flaunted his success in. Kayla sobbed, grabbing her bag, stuffing things into a suitcase, mumbling, No, he's old. How did he pull this off?" Angela read from her clipboard, "Master bedroom, pack. Laundry room, pack. Garage, pack." The movers followed each line, fast, neat, silent. Adam chased them, shouting, "Don't touch my stuff." The sheriff raised one hand. "If you shout again, I will escort you off the property. This is no longer your house." A simple sentence, but from a sheriff, it carried the weight of a courtroom. Neighbors lined both sides of the street, filming, photographing, sharing. Each phone lifted was another blade, slicing into Adam's already rotted pride. I stood behind the maple tree, eyes on the porch where I had replaced every slat, and saw the exact expression I had waited years to see. The moment of realization. Not legal realization, moral realization. Adam spun, panicked, searching for someone to stand with him, but no one did. No friends, no co-workers, no neighbors, and especially not his father. The sheriff signed the final form, handed it to Angela, and said clearly, "House is officially transferred." The Maple Hill house, the place where he spat on my face, no longer contained a single millimeter that belonged to him. All he had left were 2 suitcases, a wife crying, her eyes swollen, and dozens of cameras recording the moment he lost everything, with no one feeling sorry for him. It was the moment every mask shattered in front of the entire neighborhood, the moment his fake honor collapsed, and no words could save him anymore. That afternoon, the Maple Hill driveway was so empty, it felt like you could hear the heartbeat of a man falling apart. Adam and Kayla had cleared everything, 2 suitcases, 1 cardboard box, a few wrinkled shirts, and an old toolbox I once used to teach him how to tighten bolts when he was 8. Kayla sat on the edge of the porch, mascara streaked, breath sharp, every sentence a blade of blame. "This is all your fault. You were always arrogant. You thought you were better than everyone. Look now, we're on the street." Adam didn't argue. He sat still, hands limp, eyes hollow, like someone who'd had the road ahead cut from under him. It was the first time in his life he couldn't say the line he always used whenever he messed up. "It's fine, Dad's here." Just then, Mrs. Helen from across the street walked over, slow steps, holding a white envelope. She stood before Adam, silent for a few seconds, then extended the envelope and said one single line. "Your father asked me to give you this." Then she walked away without looking back. Adam stared at the envelope like it was glowing. He opened it with hands shaking so hard the paper crackled. Inside was the letter I wrote last night, before leaving Maple Hill forever. It began with his name, Adam, written big and straight, the handwriting of a man who supervised work sites for 30 years. Steady, firm, unshaken despite life hitting him more than enough. "Adam, if you are reading this, it means the house is no longer yours. And maybe for the first time in your life, you understand that loss is not just a word on paper. Adam, I still remember you at 5, running on rain-soaked grass and hugging my neck so tight I thought it would snap. And still I laughed. You once said I was a superhero. You once believed I could fix everything. But I forgot to teach you that some things, once broken, cannot be fixed. I remember when your mother died, how you buried your face in my shirt and cried, and I had to swallow my tears just to help you sleep. I remember nights on the construction site, hands cut, back aching, yet I still brought home a toy for you. I remember you showing me an A on your report card while I stood behind your door, too tired to stand but still feeling lucky. I remember all of that. And strangely, you forgot everything. Adam, I can endure every word you said, except one thing you said at the BBQ. Weak old man. You spat on my face as if I were an obstacle in your way. But son, spit only dirties the skin. Ingratitude dirties the soul. I did not hurt because of the spit. I hurt because you didn't hesitate. That 1 second told me you didn't grow into a man. You grew into someone who thinks a father's gentleness is a license to disrespect him. But Adam, the nature of fatherhood is this. I will take the hits as long as you are safe. But at some point, I must protect what's left of myself. The part your mother loved, the part you once trusted, the part I refuse to let you destroy again. I didn't write this letter to make you feel guilty. I wrote it so you remember. Gratitude is the first asset of an adult, and you lost it long ago. I hope that one day when you fall hard enough that no one is there to catch you, you'll understand why I had to walk away, not to abandon you, but so you can finally see yourself without my shadow covering you. Adam, I'm not asking you to understand me today. People only understand when they hit bottom. I only hope that one day when you climb out of that bottom, you look back at the road you took and learn to apologize to your own heart before anyone else. And lastly, Adam, if one day you want to find me, don't look for me in the Maple Hill house. Look for me in the part of your heart you abandoned, because that's where I'll be. As for me, I'm going where your mother and I once dreamed we'd grow old together. That is all. Adam folded the letter's edges with trembling fingers, like someone touching burning coal. He didn't cry out loud. His face just tightened, contorted, as if every memory he tried to bury was rising at once. He sat down on the driveway, staring at the letter, then at the emptiness of a home no longer his. And at the exact minute, he read the last line. The bus dropped me off at the stop in Kalispell, Montana. I stepped down and breathed in the northern air, the air my wife and I once dreamed we would grow old in together. I pulled my canvas bag along and walked toward the cabin by Flathead Lake, the place I'd rented long-term, the place that held our unfinished promise, and the place where the rest of my life would begin, untouched by anyone who would ever spit in my face again. On the Maple Hill driveway, Adam lost his father for the first time, and at Flathead, I, the one he had looked down on, found myself for the first time. 1 year after Maple Hill closed its final door behind Adam, the neighborhood still whispered about it the way people recall a storm that leaves a cold trail behind. I didn't follow his life, but small, scattered fragments still reached me through Mrs. Helen, not because she was nosy, but because in Maple Hill, news travels fast during late afternoon, garden watering and conversations over wooden fences. She didn't know exactly how he lived that whole year. She only pieced it together from what she saw and what people murmured around the block. Like the unemployment story, she said only a few weeks after the sheriff eviction, Adam's company emailed him saying he was being placed on temporary review. But people in the neighborhood, especially Mark, who worked at the same company, said clearly that it was the company's way of firing someone without writing terminated. After the video of him spitting on his father spread across Maple Hill in a small town, that kind of reputation is enough to make sure no one hires him. Then the debt. Mrs. Helen heard from Abby at house number 15, who worked at Spark Federal Credit Union, that Adam's credit card had gone 3 months overdue, the revolving balance over the limit, and the account was frozen. He had poured money into gadgets and vehicle payments, and now with no income, everything came back to choke him. Worst was the reputation. Mrs. Helen said that whenever Adam applied for an office job, as soon as the hiring manager searched his old address or his name, their face changed color. In a small town, scandals travel faster than home listings, so no company hired him. He was forced to take the kind of job he once used to look down on me for doing: hauling loads at a materials warehouse, lifting 40-pound cement bags, pushing pallets under the heat, stacking heavy plywood until his shoulders burned. Some days she saw him walking past Maple Hill, shirt covered in wood dust, back, bent like someone carrying more weight than he could bear. And a few months later, Kayla left, quietly. No dramatic breakup. People just saw her packing in the rain, stuffing things into a trunk, then speeding off. Adam stood under a friend's porch roof, not chasing, not explaining, like a man who knew he had nothing left to hold on to. Once, Mrs. Helen saw Adam sitting in his faded truck, parked under the maple tree at the top of the hill, engine off, sitting still for hours. In his hands was the letter I wrote. One day she saw him open the envelope again, reading it, then folding it back like someone touching a wound that hadn't healed. Then early August arrived, Montana cool even before fall. The air from Flathead Lake carried pine, ice, and the soft consonants of the north. In the small cabin I rented long-term, the place my wife and I once dreamed we'd grow old together, I stood by the wood-framed window and saw a faded truck roll down the dirt road. It moved slowly, like someone searching. I knew why it came. In the letter, I wrote only, "I'm going where your mother and I once dreamed we'd grow old." That was all. No address, no cabin number, no directions. But for someone who had lost his home, his wife, his job, his reputation, and had only one remaining point of light in his memory, that was enough to set him on the road. On the day Adam found the place, he circled the forest edge, asking the nearby cabins, then circled again, then slowed down, like a heart finding the right rhythm. He stopped a few dozen meters from my cabin. Adam stepped out, thinner, eyes quieter, hands trembling as if he were holding something fragile. He looked at the cabin, the place filled with things my wife once loved, the wooden door I built, the porch light, the maplewood table we dreamed we'd use in our old age. He looked at everything the way someone looks at themselves 1 year earlier, when he stood on the Maple Hill driveway and lost his father. Adam stood there for over a minute, just staring at the door. He didn't step forward, didn't knock, didn't call my name. He just stood, like a child discovering fear of his own mistakes for the first time. Then he turned away, got back in the truck, and left the dirt road, leaving a thin trail of dust drifting in the evening wind. I remained behind the window. I didn't call out, didn't follow, didn't try to hold anything together, because I understood. Some lessons, if a father interrupts too soon, the son will never grow. And in that Montana sunset, when the last light fell over the Swan Range Mountains, reflecting on Flathead Lake like a sheet of quiet glass, I realized this story wasn't ending. It was simply being rewritten in a different ink, the ink of pain that had settled, of debts turned into lessons, of reputation lost then rebuilt, of once arrogant hands finally doing real work. And in that silence, one truth emerged clearer than ever. Silence doesn't heal everything, but it teaches a person how to hear themselves. If you've listened this far, thank you. With every bit of gratitude a storyteller can offer someone on the other side of the screen. Maybe you've once been dismissed by your own family, once stood still while someone you loved hurt you in front of others, once walked away just to keep the last piece of your dignity. If this story touched you somewhere, know that you are not alone. And if you want to continue walking with me through journeys where justice arrives, not through shouting, but through truth, through silence, and through steps taken away from places that no longer deserve you, I invite you to stay. Hit follow so the next stories can find the people who need them. Grateful you're here.